Something big is brewing behind the scenes in Boston. Not the kind of headline that makes fans storm the streets, but the kind that could quietly redefine the Celtics' future. At first glance, it might seem like just another cap-clearing move, another piece in a never-ending offseason chess match. But what if this subtle trade proposal is actually the franchise's most strategic decision yet? What if swapping Anfernee Simons for Nic Claxton is the Celtics' way of preparing for a storm no one sees coming? Anfernee Simons arrived in Boston as a promising scorer, but never truly fit the long-term blueprint. His offensive upside is undeniable, yet his presence never felt secure. Every rumor, every whisper around the league hinted at something temporary. And now, the writing is on the wall. Boston does not just want to trade Simons, they need to. Not because he's expendable, but because there's a bigger plan unfolding. Enter Nic Claxton. On paper, he is a 6'11" athletic big with solid rim protection, but that description does not scratch the surface of what Claxton could mean to Boston. The Celtics are not just looking for someone to fill in the minutes left by Porzingis or Horford. They are searching for a long-term anchor. Someone who can stabilize the paint and give Tatum the freedom to dominate without overextending himself. On defense, Claxton fits that mold in ways that few young bigs can. But here's what no one's talking about. Claxton's offensive game is still raw, yes, but that makes him even more of a blank slate for a franchise that has proven it can mold talent when given time and patience. What happens if Boston unlocks his face-up game? What if that rumored three-point shot becomes a weapon in Joe Mazzulla's system suddenly? You are not just replacing Porzingis. You are evolving beyond him. And the financial mechanics, almost poetic. Claxton's lower cap hit gives Boston breathing room under the punishing second apron, while still bringing back value. The 2027 second-round pick is more than a throw-in. It represents flexibility, options, a future chip when Boston needs one most. Now take a step back. Neemias Queta as a starter, that was never meant to be the final picture. Claxton steps in and instantly challenges that idea. Whether he becomes the day one starter or the elite backup Boston desperately lacked during moments of vulnerability last season, he raises the team's floor and opens up strategic depth most contenders crave. So what about Brooklyn? Simons brings scoring, spacing, and playmaking. Sure, he fits alongside Porter Jr. He can take pressure off Cam Thomas, and he adds leverage in extension talks. But here's the kicker, and Boston knows this. Simons is on an expiring deal. He is a test run, a rental with upside, not a cornerstone. The Celtics, on the other hand, would be betting on permanence, on a future that still revolves around Tatum and Brown but leans into a younger, more defensively versatile supporting cast. The question now is not whether this trade makes sense. It's whether it happens soon enough. Every passing day Simons stays on the roster, Boston risks losing negotiating power, but if they act swiftly, they don't just trade a guard. They acquire a center who could outgrow expectations in a system built on adaptability and toughness. And maybe this is the point that turns heads. Could Claxton become the X factor when Boston needs to stagger Tatum and Brown more frequently? Could he be the reason opposing teams stop attacking the paint late in playoff games? What if the next signature Celtics block does not come from Robert Williams or Al Horford, but from Claxton chasing down a fast break, igniting TD Garden with a roar? Because this is not just about defense or depth or dollars. It's about redefining the Celtics' core identity. Without sacrificing the ambition of a repeat title run, Tatum is still the face. Brown is still the backbone. But Claxton could be the lungs, giving this team breath, stamina, resilience. The NBA's smartest front offices move in silence. And this trade idea feels like one of those quiet steps that leads to thunder. But it raises a bigger, more provocative question. If Boston does pull this off, and Claxton thrives, what does that say about the future of elite centers in this league? Are we watching the beginning of a new model, one where mobility, length, and intelligence matter more than traditional dominance? One thing is certain, if this trade happens, it won't be a footnote. It could become the kind of strategic shift that only makes sense in hindsight. The kind that wins games in May and June. And if Boston gets it right, it won't just be a win now, it will be a win later too. What if the Boston Celtics are about to solve their biggest problem in the most unexpected way possible? No trade, no bidding war, just a quiet mid-season move that reshapes their front court and resets expectations, while fans debate rotations and speculate about Neemias Queta or Luka Garza taking the reins. A completely different name is quietly hovering over the horizon. Nikola Vucevic. Yes, that Vucevic. The former two-time All-Star, known for his offensive IQ and elite rebounding, could be the unexpected answer to the Celtics' glaring hole at center, but here's the twist. Boston might not need to give up a single asset to make it happen. According to recent reports, the Chicago Bulls are considering buying out Vucevic's contract. Let that sink in. A big man who just averaged 18.5 points, over 10 rebounds, and shot over 40% from deep could suddenly hit the open market, and if he does, the Celtics should be the first to pounce. But why would Vucevic come to Boston? And why now? On the surface, this seems like a mismatch. Vucevic is 34, Boston is in transition, possibly entering a gap year as Jason Tatum recovers from his Achilles injury. But that perception is outdated. Even without Tatum at full strength, the Celtics are not a lottery-bound team. They are a disciplined, battle-tested roster with championship DNA. And adding Vucevic could be the stabilizing force that keeps them in the hunt, rather than in the shadows. This is not about replacing Porzingis. This is about reinventing the front court in a smarter, more sustainable way. Unlike Porzingis, who relies heavily on shot blocking and length, Vucevic controls the game with timing, space manipulation, and underrated passing vision. He is not a rim protector in the traditional sense, but he changes the geometry of the game. He pulls defenders away from the paint, creating driving lanes for Boston's guards. He hits the pick-and-pop mid-range with surgical precision. And more importantly, he brings maturity and patience, something that could be invaluable during stretches where Boston needs offensive composure. And do not overlook the timing. A mid-season buyout means Boston could add Vucevic after assessing how the season unfolds. No rush, no panic, just strategic execution. The Celtics could tread water until January or February, then pounce on a player who immediately raises their ceiling. That's not just smart, that's ruthless. But here's the uncomfortable question nobody is asking. Could Vucevic actually turn Boston into a sleeper contender? Even without Tatum at 100%, it's not as crazy as it sounds. If Jaylen Brown continues evolving as a primary scorer, if Drew Holiday remains a defensive anchor, and if Vucevic slots into a high-usage offensive role, Boston becomes a nightmare matchup for slower teams. Imagine trying to guard a lineup with Brown attacking off the dribble, Holiday playmaking from the top, and Vucevic stretching the floor or operating in the high post. That's not a rebuilding team. That's a playoff threat waiting to explode. And for Vucevic, this might be the rare chance to join a franchise where he actually matters. He spent years in Orlando with no direction. Then came the long, uninspired Bulls run. But in Boston, he could become a catalyst, a missing piece, not just a stopgap, but a veteran leader who helps usher in the post-Horford era with dignity and fire. Critics might say his defense is a liability, that he's too slow to keep up and switch heavy schemes, but Boston has the personnel to cover that. With wings like Derek White and Brown flying around and Holiday guarding the point of attack, Vucevic would rarely be exposed. In fact, he could be hidden just enough to let his offensive brilliance shine. This would be a signing about timing, about opportunity, and about vision, and it would say something deeper about the Celtics' identity, that they are not interested in tanking, not ready to throw away a season, not willing to accept mediocrity under the excuse of injury. So what happens if Boston makes the call and Vucevic says yes? You get a team that suddenly has one of the smartest offensive bigs in the league feeding cutters, knocking down pick-and-pop threes and anchoring the glass. You get a locker room presence with playoff hunger. You get insurance if Queta or Garza falters, and you send a message to the rest of the NBA that Boston does not rebuild. Boston reloads. Now think about the rest of the league. If Vucevic hits the buyout market, contenders will come knocking. The Lakers, the Heat, maybe even the Bucks. But if the Celtics are proactive, if they sell the culture, the legacy, the chance to be the guy who helps stabilize a wounded empire, then they might just win that race. Because when you zoom out, this isn't just about a free agent. It's about belief, about resilience, about refusing to let one injury define a season. And if Vucevic wants to rewrite the final chapter of his career with impact and purpose, there may be no better place to do it than in Boston Green. What if the Boston Celtics are planning something no one saw coming? Not a short-term patch, not a low-risk veteran signing, but a seismic move that could reset the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. Domantas Sabonis, a name barely whispered in Celtics circles. Until now, while the NBA world has fixated on Jason Tatum's injury and Boston's supposed decline, a far more dangerous idea has been quietly gaining traction. What if the Celtics go all in? What if they trade depth and future picks for a front court cornerstone who could change their identity overnight? What if the Celtics are preparing to go bigger when everyone expected them to shrink? The idea came up in a recent podcast, but it is not just podcast noise anymore. A legitimate proposal has surfaced, one that involves Anfernee Simons, Sam Hauser, Georges Niang, Neemias Queta, and the first-round picks heading to Sacramento. On paper, it feels heavy, expensive, even desperate, but that is the illusion. Look deeper, and the move starts to feel less like panic and more like precision. Sabonis is not just another big man, he is a system. A high-post creator who can run offense like a guard, rebound like a monster, and finish in traffic with ruthless efficiency. He averaged nearly 14 boards and 6 assists per game last season. Numbers unheard of for most modern centers. More than that, he brings toughness, poise, and most importantly, control. Boston would not just be adding a scorer or a defender. They would be adding an offensive engine. Now ask yourself this. When was the last time Boston had someone who could anchor the offense from the post, allow their wings to cut freely, and still hit the open man without hesitation? Not since prime. Al Horford had the Celtics had that kind of versatility at the 5. Sabonis could give them that, only with more size, more youth, and more consistent production. And here's where things get even more intriguing. Sabonis is locked in for more years. Over $175 million. That kind of stability is rare for a big man in his prime. With Tatum and Brown already in place, Sabonis would become the third pillar of a terrifying trio. One that could punish small lineups, crash the glass relentlessly, and slow down the pace when needed. A team that could win ugly, play through the half-court, and grind playoff basketball into submission. Critics will scream about the cost. Losing Simons, Hauser, and to first-rounders sounds like too much on the surface, but look closer. Simons was never meant to be a long-term fit. Hauser, while valuable, becomes expendable with depth developing behind him. And draft picks. The Celtics are in win-now mode. The future is not 10 years from now. The future is April, May, June. Now flip the question. Why would the Kings move Sabonis? Because their window is getting complicated. De'Aaron Fox is the face, but Sacramento has yet to figure out how to translate regular season success into playoff dominance. If the right offer appears, one that balances their roster and gives them shooting, youth, and flexibility, they might listen, especially if Sabonis starts to show frustration with their limitations. And here is the unspoken truth. The Celtics are not treating this as a throwaway year. Yes, Tatum's Achilles recovery casts a shadow, but Boston is not playing for lottery balls. They are playing to survive long enough to strike. Sabonis is not a desperation move. He is a weapon you bring in to defy expectations. Imagine a lineup with Drew Holiday at the point, Jaylen Brown as the primary wing, Sabonis anchoring the post, and Tatum returning down the stretch to close the season. That is not a rebuilding team. That is a tactical, hardened, balanced contender. And here's another thought no one wants to admit. Boston's current center rotation is not sustainable. Xavier Tillman, Neemias Queta, and Luka Garza are serviceable, but none can consistently challenge elite bigs in 7-game series. Sabonis, on the other hand, demands respect. You cannot sag off him, you cannot bully him, and you certainly cannot ignore him when he is orchestrating from the elbow. So now the Celtics are staring down a choice. Do they wait, pray for development, and hope their current depth holds the line, or do they make the bold move, risk short-term discomfort, and go after a star that could make them immediately dangerous again? Because here's what no one is saying out loud. If the Celtics pull this off, if they add Sabonis to a roster that already has playoff muscle memory and a core that has been to the mountaintop, they become scarier than they were last season. Maybe not flashier, but more durable, more unpredictable, more deadly in the half-court, and in a league where everything speeds up in the regular season but slows down in the playoffs. Having a player like Sabonis might be the ultimate cheat code. What if Boston's next title run doesn't start with a superstar splash, but with a quiet, calculated heist that adds one of the league's most overlooked defensive forces? What if Brad Stevens is not hunting headlines, but hunting fit, precision, and future-proofing the Celtics for the next half-decade? The answer could wear a Brooklyn jersey today but dominate in green tomorrow. Nic Claxton. Right now, Boston is staring at a brutal reality. If the season tipped off today, the Celtics would be asking Neemias Queta, Luka Garza, and Amari Williams to hold down the center position on a team expected to contend. That is not just risky, that is reckless. Even Xavier Tillman, while serviceable, is better suited for spurts and switches, not anchoring the paint for 30 minutes a night. The Celtics are too smart and too close to the mountaintop to rely on question marks in the one position that could decide the postseason. That is why Claxton is not just a target, he is the answer. Claxton is entering his prime at 26 and has quietly evolved into one of the most mobile, versatile defensive bigs in the league. He is long, he is fast, he switches like a guard and protects the rim like a veteran shot blocker. While other centers are trying to keep up with the pace of the modern game, Claxton thrives in it. He is built for a team like Boston, a team that switches, scrambles, rotates, and never stops moving, and the timing could not be better. The Brooklyn Nets are clearly pivoting. They are not playing for today. They are playing for 2027 and beyond. 5 first-round picks in one draft says everything. They are stacking youth. They are growing slow and deep. And that makes Claxton quietly expendable. They drafted Danny Wolf, a 7-footer with shooting touch, and still have Day'Ron Sharpe waiting in the wings. The writing is on the wall. Claxton is too good, too developed, and too expensive for what Brooklyn is trying to build. They want flexibility. Boston wants certainty. That creates a rare opportunity, one that smart front offices pounce on.